or the chubby clients. So you've just invented a new type of customer for me now. I've got thick, thin, and chubby clients.
There you go.
So moving on again a little bit then to talk about functionality. There's been an awful lot of engineering done by the likes of Microsoft, Citrix, and VMware to create these, very graphically rich protocols like PC over IP, HDX, Remote FX. And currently the Pano, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, those protocols are not supported. You've got your own kind of graphical redirection service. For those people who've not played around with this, you install a bit of software inside the virtual desktop, which kind of does this redirection of the graphics back to the device. And that currently supports 24 bits as the graphics experience. Mm-hmm. So what I wanted to ask was, do you see this like sort of gap between, say, this super duper rich graphics experience that comes from one of these vendors to something that the Pano device is providing? Is that an anxiety? Do you get customers saying we want a higher level of graphics resolution? Would that cause a problem for you guys in terms of keeping the purity of the device, not having any software to update? Where do customers seem to fall on that distinction between those two extremes, if you like?
Sure. Well, customers are always demanding, rightly so, and it's our job as a vendor to fulfill those needs and requirements over a period of time. And we remain committed to continue to deliver a very compelling end user experience with a zero-client architecture as defined by Pano. I was actually at an event last week and presenting to an audience of IT directors and IT admins, the folks who are responsible for thousands and thousands of end users in an enterprise environment. A very similar question came up at that time from the audience, and I asked a question back from the audience: what percentage of the end users that you guys are managing are busy watching video, high definition video, most of the time, and has required a level of power at their disposal to have that kind of high definition enriched experience? Less than 2 to 3% of the hands went up. Okay. I asked them, okay, what percentage of your users experience multimedia, if you will, as a part of their daily job and daily activity, let's say for training and so on, which is sort of YouTube quality level video experience? 20 to 25% of the hands went up. Okay. Repeated the question, okay, what percentage of how many of you are responsible for users who mostly meaning bulk of the day spend on business productivity applications, some internet surfing and so on? Almost 100% of the hands went up. So the reality here is that there is a segmentation of the users. The reality is that for VDI and for desktop virtualization in general, there is no one size fits all when it comes to the endpoint and when it comes to the overall solution. Okay, so the critical thing here is to really understand the different segments of the target end user communities that are targeted by virtualization. And from our perspective, there are at least 3 broad classes of those users. There are the task workers, there are the knowledge workers, and then there are the power users. Okay. Pano's solution today in production addresses vast majority of the requirements for task workers and knowledge workers, which means business productivity applications, office type of applications, internet surfing, YouTube quality video with audio video sync. Our product supports all of these applications with very, very compelling and responsive user experience on which we actually get significant thumbs up with the product that we have today. Now and these classes of users happen to be 60 to 80% of the user community in a typical enterprise. Okay, so even with the current product, we are able to kind of address the needs and requirements of a very broad cross section of the user community from a user experience perspective. Yes, there are a class of users which will be 10, 15, 20% of the user community where they have needs for 3D graphics, high definition video. Some shops will have applications like CAD, CAM, and editing and so on. Pano's position so far is that one has to be very careful and ask a very important question: that is that target community the right audience for virtualizing the desktop at all? Or should that community be left alone with their powerful workstations and leave that power at their disposal on their desk? Okay. So with that segmentation, while yes, the approach that we have today and the maturity of the product that we have today does not go forward and worry about or tackle the needs and requirements of high definition 3D graphics and video and so on. But it gives a fantastic experience, including multimedia for knowledge workers, task workers, for those kinds of workloads. At the same time, obviously, we are constantly climbing up the innovation curve with our R&D effort. And it is our firm belief that we will continue to create this alignment between the benefits of the zero client and end user experience requirements, not just today, but into the future, and be able to kind of address the needs of 100% of the target user communities out there with a zero client architecture.
Sure. I mean, from my own very narrow experience, one of my experiments at the moment is my partner has a very old Windows XP laptop, which is horrifically slow. And it's really coming to the end of its life. So I thought, I've got servers here in my house, very quiet ones, by the way. I'm going to experiment on her, yes, be my little guinea pig, and just try these various devices out on her, because she's probably the closest thing I would have to a target end user who uses a PC for her work. And she loved Pano, yeah. And I think, to be honest with you, anything I gave her that delivered a virtual desktop she loved, because, you switch on one of these devices and the virtual desktop is already powered up and running, unlike a laptop which needs to be powered on. And I said, log in. She asked me what her password was. I said, it's the same password that's on your laptop. And the desktop just appeared. And she went, I love this, straight away. And what's, I think, interesting about that is what she is frustrated by is I power on my computer in the morning, I then go off and have a cup of tea, come back, I log into it, then I go off and finish my cup of tea, have my breakfast, and then my computer is ready to use. She doesn't really see the device as such. What she sees is the hassles that she has to get started in the morning, which almost anything would be better. I mean, even if I gave her an RDP shortcut on her desktop to the virtual machine, the horriblest way of delivering a virtual machine that you can think of, she would still have a better experience. So I think sometimes when we look at the user experience, their perceptions can be quite skewed from a very, from a point of view that maybe we don't even think about. We worry about the graphical experience, blah, 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 blah. She's just worried about how long does it take me to log in and get started each day. So what she thinks is important is quite different from what we as IT people think is what's important. But on the issue of these protocols, I've often looked at them, and these demos are very impressive. When they do, sort of Doom or whatever it is, being through PC over IP, and obviously they want to push something very high end down that pipe to show, look, it stands up to even the most extreme graphics. But you're often left there thinking, yeah, that's brilliant, but that isn't what I'm actually delivering to my users, as you quite rightly put. What I'm delivering is Word, Excel, PowerPoint, some CRM application, email, and half a dozen of applications that are specific to their job function. And it's those that have to cope with the end user, not, if they're on YouTube all the time, I'm worried. I'm paying these people a good salary to work for me. But, if all they're doing is watching jokey videos on YouTube, I'm sort of like, well, no, you should be in Excel, like, sort of, it's putting data in. And I know it's a very cheerless view of work, that all you should be doing when you're at work is work. But at the end of the day, these systems are expensive, and we should be delivering them to make people productive, not to, be unproductive and so on and so forth. Absolutely. But I guess that what you were saying towards the end leads us on to my other question, which is, are there specific scenarios, I mean, beyond task worker and beyond, key application worker, are there specific scenarios and circumstances where the zero client is an ideal fit?
Absolutely. Actually, before I answer that question, I just would like to go back for a second, sure. and I think that will lead in very nicely to the question you're asking. People often ask a question that do I believe that virtual desktops will ever achieve PC equivalency? And my response is, actually, virtual desktops will exceed PC equivalency. And some of the things that you were outlining earlier, the fact that a virtual desktop is always on, the fact that virtual desktops can follow me wherever I go, whatever state I leave the virtual desktop in, I can connect into the same virtual desktop from another location and continue working from where I left off. It's almost like a virtual pause and a restart without actually restarting the operating environment.
Yeah.
Okay. Virtual desktops are automatically backed up. Virtual desktops will automatically migrate from one physical footprint to another if the hardware goes down without the end user seeing any disruption. Virtual desktops, by definition, will be a lot more secure. Users will not have to worry about malware that they can carry on their laptop or on their desktop and infect the network. So a lot of the issues that even end users face go away when you virtualize the desktop. Then ultimately the question boils down to, again, what we were discussing earlier in terms of high definition experience to good enough productivity experience. And obviously, that's where a lot of the new protocols that are coming about, whether it's PC over IP or HDX or Remote FX, they are really geared towards also plugging that gap of delivering very, very high definition experience. But the concern and question there is, again, at what cost? Okay. At the end of the day, our firm belief at Pano is that while VDI is about very compelling end user experience, but more importantly, it needs to be about the price performance value that it delivers. Because if you look at a predecessor to VDI, which was server virtualization, one of the big reasons that it took off like wildfire because the CapEx benefit was obvious, not just OpEx. Obviously, everybody recognized the OpEx benefits of any kind of virtualization, but server virtualization also disrupted server expenses from a CapEx perspective. Rather than going off and buying 40 servers, you buy 4 and you have immediate savings. That is not true about VDI. VDI actually has a significant barrier, particularly with thin client oriented solutions using some of these high-end display protocols with very expensive backends, whereby the total cost, upfront cost of a per virtual desktop could be 2 to 3 times of a traditional PC. Okay, and actually in that regard, Pano actually announced a new product in North America just a few weeks ago called Pano Express, which is an all-in bundle, including all the server hardware, storage, all the software licenses, Windows licenses, and the Pano footprint for less than $500 per virtual desktop, actually $489 per virtual desktop. And that is, and we did that specifically to highlight the biggest barrier that VDI has, which is CapEx cost. So our belief is at the end of the day, the success of VDI is not dependent on high-end protocols. It's really dependent on optimized price performance. And that's what we are committed to. So when you take that into account, okay, you have to look at some of these protocols with a different pair of lenses. While they are fantastic technologies delivering really awesome experience, and sometimes you really wonder that this stuff is running in the data center, but that's exactly what these display protocols are accomplishing. But remember, the fact that they are display protocols means that they require a pretty significant processing footprint, not just on the back end in the server, but also on the client. Because these display protocols are literally sending drawing instructions to an endpoint to process before they can render the UI. And hence, you need a processing endpoint. And so you're back to that client server model. So if anything, these display protocols, the more powerful they get, more they are shifting VDI into client server model, which we again believe, back to our previous discussion, is not the right architecture.
Sure.
So Pano not only have a pure true zero client, we have our own protocol, which is more of a low level bus level protocol, which is extremely smart, extremely efficient, and is able to deliver very compelling user experience without placing any kind of processing burden on the endpoint. And when we say compelling experience, we are not saying that, okay, all you can do is do some Excel and some PowerPoint and maybe do internet surfing. You know, you get fantastic video quality, but it's YouTube level. It's not going to be full motion video, high definition. It's not going to allow you to necessarily do 3D editing, for example. But that's not the activity most of the knowledge workers and task workers involved in. Okay. So that now leads me to the question you asked about what are the scenarios. So yes, there is segmentation of knowledge workers, task workers, and power users, and we are really focused on knowledge and task workers, and we are doing that very successfully. But fundamentally, where the zero client architecture as delivered by Pano is really resonating very well are the areas where people truly want to have a very disposable